Our neighbors are vehemently possessive of their land, as they call it.
Tonight, we have the opportunity for sacrifice.
Sanguis vita est, sanguis sanguinum habendus est.
We are talking about the horror movie Hallowed Ground. Now this one is directed, written and stars Miles Doleac. And this is a kind of a backwoods story, if you like. You've seen the kind of like in Deliverance, that sort of thing. So the story focuses on these two women who are actually married, and they have had some trouble in their relationship. One of them's had an affair with a guy. Now obviously they're a lesbian couple, so this has caused problems in numerous kind of ways. So they decided to go to this kind of remote, kind of rural cabin, Native American kind of reserve area, where they've kind of, you know, hired this kind of cabin for a kind of a time to have a little break. And they're met there by this woman who essentially runs this kind of area, and she tells them not to go past this particular barrier, this kind of barbed wire area, which is bordered onto someone else's property, and that property is owned by this kind of redneck family who are into some weird culty, almost satanic type stuff. And there's this feud going between the kind of the Native American kind of people and these kind of rednecks who are kind of on the other side of this kind of fence. Miles Doleac plays kind of the main bad guy, so to speak, the main kind of one of these rednecks. Anyway, inevitably you can probably guess what happens. One of the women ultimately goes, just steps into the kind of the property and is caught straight away, and this kind of ignites this feud that ends in tragedy and kind of bloodshed on kind of both sides. So there is an element of a kind of a supernatural here as well, so that's kind of also adds a little bit into the mix. So let's talk about Hallowed Ground. So if you are a fan of the kind of Deliverance type movies and the kind of the Wrong Turn, that sort of thing, then you may well get a kick out of this one, because it kind of follows that route, with being maybe a little bit more kind of subtle and having a little bit more political commentary on it as well. I mean, there's all sorts of things here, from obviously an LGBTQ sort of standpoint, from you know, Native American kind of standpoint, along with a few other things that are kind of touched upon here. Well, it never gets too preachy. So what worked, first of all? I thought the premise here was pretty good. These two women kind of coming to this kind of rural area, not really knowing what they're kind of doing. Very different kind of type of personalities, and the way they kind of interact with people, I feel, was pretty good. And I quite like this setup here. And having seen the trailer before, obviously watched this movie, I kind of had an idea about what was going to kind of happen here. So their setup was all pretty good, and things escalate worse and worse as the film progresses. And another thing I liked about this movie is our kind of if you want to call them our antagonists, these kind of this kind of redneck type, for lack of a better word, they are given some characterization, and although they're certainly not, they are painted as the antagonists, they are still given some degree of backstory, and kind of you see somewhat kind of from their sort of point of view, so to speak. So you almost feel like they are almost like a bit like yin and yang. So both kind of both sort of sides have an element of the other in them, so to speak. So there's not a clear protagonist side, not a clear antagonist side, although they do kind of fall quite heavily on one or the other. But neither are exactly black or white. That was all quite good. There's also some really kind of good atmosphere here. I really love the music, the way that kind of really amplifies the kind of the tension. This kind of this obviously sort of southern kind of style of music that you've got here, that again is very reminiscent of those kind of like those Backwoods films that you all kind of know and love, and really adds to this tension. The movie kind of goes at a somewhat of a slow pace, which I think may annoy some people, but I actually thought it was. We'll come on to it again, but it works for the film that it was trying to be, I feel. And there are some more sort of action sequences, so to speak, kind of splattered throughout. I've got to say, I thought the acting was all very good here as well. All the cast here did a pretty good job of making characters, the way they kind of present their dialogue seem kind of quite genuine. Maybe with the exception of this boyfriend who turns up. He seems a little bit OTT, but I got a feeling the way that was written. And that is, I would say, the main issue I have with this movie is some of the writing here, I feel, is a little bit on the weaker side. So like I said, this boyfriend who one of the women has had an affair with kind of turns up, and he seems very cartoonish. It's a little bit OTT, to be honest with you, and not really a believable character. But the thing that really kind of struck me with this film in regard to any type of negatives was that there seems to be some unbelievable things happen. Now when I say that, I don't mean the premise is unbelievable and there's some kind of like weird sort of like fantasy sci-fi stuff that happens. That's not what I mean. In the universe that this is set, the way people act and react to things doesn't make some sense to me in a lot of instances. So for an example, we see a lot of characters with guns, primarily from this kind of like this redneck side, but they don't really seem to use them. So when we have characters that have a clear line of sight to the other side, they don't tend to like fire and things like this, and we have a lot of people, that's just one example, but there's lots of instances like that where people don't seem to act or react in the way that a normal human being would. Another example was there's a reveal about how one particular character may be related to another one on the other side, and when something happens to one of them, the way they react and kind of doesn't really ring true. So I think the acting in regards to some of the line delivery here it seems quite natural, but sometimes the way the characters are written seems a little bit unnatural, and the situations where these guys are in, again, it just doesn't seem to quite ring true. I also feel the movie is too long, and this movie runs at nearly 2 hours, and it does not need to be that long because there's simply not enough story here. And I feel that it could have had 15 to 20 minutes cut out of this to make the story a little bit more punchy, and just kind of flow a little bit. Because it just considering there's things seem a little drawn out, especially when you get sort of towards the end. It really does seem drawn out. So if you're a sort of person who thinks, oh man, it's a really abrupt ending and I don't like it, this is literally the opposite. The ending kind of crawls along and kind of thinking, is this still going? So I feel that this movie is just a little bit too long. The writing not quite as kind of tight as it could have been, and some of these situations because of that seem a little bit unlikely and just kind of like don't really seem like real people, and it's kind of a shame because the setup is good and the acting I think is good, but because of these situations seem a little bit just unbelievable in like a real world scenario in regards to how people will react and things like that. It kind of takes away from some of the kind of the tension ultimately. But it's still an enjoyable film if you like these kind of like these Backwoods style movies, things like Deliverance, Wrong Turn, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that type of thing. Then you may well get a kick out of this one. I'll give this one an above average 6 out of 10. If you like those sort of films, do check it out. Let me know what your thoughts are, and thanks for watching. Bye for now.